What do you want now?
Tell me.
Well, crap. As a challenging game, VOD Billions gives players 3 options to change the game difficulty: population density, game duration, and the map. New players can't choose which map to play, although there are some things to understand about map differences, so I'll cover that last. I think the most interesting is population density, so I'll start there. But first, some general notes. There's 2 major components to victory. First is that you, as a player, need to have the right skills and habits to beat the game. You have to pick up those habits yourself, although guides such as this one can show you what sort of habits you need to work on. But the second component is knowing the game mechanics, and especially being able to know what's coming in the future. Knowing where the game is going is critical to making good judgments about troop disposition, defense placement, and knowing when and where to tech through the economy tree. Normally that knowledge is gained by playing the game over and over, and over, and over. In this video, I'm going to cover what changes with the various difficulty settings, and how you have to change your game to beat each variant. If you've played the game much, you're familiar with the score rating that you're given when you choose your difficulty at the start of a new game. This is a rough measure of how the various features interplay. However, depending on your style, 140% in one configuration might seem much easier to you than a different configuration that also gives 140%. Hopefully you'll get a better sense of that as we go through this video. The population setting has 2 different effects. First, it changes the number of infected that initially populate the world. I'll be demonstrating each session with clips of the first 2 waves, the one at day 11 and then the one at day 18. You'll see that the size of the initial wave depends on your population setting, and the size of the second wave is always larger than the first. On the very lowest population setting, this wave is only 7 runners. That's it, 7. I got 6 rangers here behind a wall, but I probably could have survived with less. In fact, let's try it with 2 rangers. Okay, here they come. Runners do 10 points of damage every second, and a wall has 400 hit points. But not all 7 runners can get to the wall, so there's only 3 or 4 dudes bashing on my precious defenses. 1 infected dies in 5 shots from these rangers, so that's 2.5 or 3 seconds for the 2 rangers. Note that the rangers choose their targets before they fire their shot, and if their target dies before the shot lands, the arrow does nothing. 2 rangers will take 21 seconds, roughly, to kill these 7 infected, which will take 26 seconds to tear down 2 walls. So I'll have 1 wall remaining, and my 2 rangers don't even get assaulted. Another thing to note is on the very low pop setting, the rest of the map is almost completely empty. It's scary how empty it is. There's no one out there. Here's the far corner of a very, very low pop map. I got this far with just a handful of units. There's now too many high point executives here for me to mess with without more soldiers or some snipers, but that's it. There are 6 population settings in the current build of the game, so I'm going to switch from the first to the third. This one is called low. There's maybe 15 runners in the first wave, and I hold them off with, well, what holds them off is 3 rangers and 1 soldier. Sitting and watching this, I'm reminded again to build defenses like I did for that vid of the previous difficulty, which I actually filmed last. Don't build a wide wall, build a deep one, and park your units bunched up in a line behind it. Infected head straight towards your base, until they take an arrow, at which point they head towards their shooter, or they see a tasty building, which usually has to be very close. For large waves, like this second wave, I probably would have been better off with 2 rows of 3 walls rather than 1 long wall. As you watch these videos, you should be getting a great sense of how effective spike traps are. The 5th population setting used to be the maximum, but the 0.9 patch at the beginning of the 2018 summer added a new setting called maximum, so that's higher than this one. Note that the first difficulty was just 18%, and now we're up to a score factor of 320%. Note that I'm still using just 1 wall and no spikes, but I've got 5 soldiers and 3 rangers, and I think 2 of these soldiers are veterans. This group is the equivalent of 24 rangers. It's a ton of firepower, and that's pretty much what's necessary to keep the large swarm away. Again, this is the first swarm in the game, right at day 11. The second wave is even worse, and I doubled my wall here against the weaker part of this wave instead of the stronger. Note that the wave split around a map obstruction before it got to my choke point, which is actually why I had built 2 defenses here. I didn't know which side it would actually hit. Also note that these zombies just keep coming. This is in part because of the noise that soldiers make, but I think part of that is there's a Village of Doom just a bit outside of view here. You can pack a lot of firepower into a small space with soldiers, but the downside is the noise. Note that snipers won't be cost effective here. You might want to check out my unit economics video for more information on that. Speaking of which, if you're liking this video, please click that like button. It helps me out, making it easier for me to do more in-depth videos like this. So as you just saw, the range of zombies that you get going from very, very low up to high is quite a jump. And the next setting will be even more zombies still. One advantage to the higher populations is that their troops have much more chance for experience, as you saw the veteran soldiers that I had before day 20. Next up is game duration. The effect that this has on the game is only to stretch out how long you have to win. The options are 80, 100, 120, and 150 days. Note that playing a longer game doesn't make the game harder, it makes the game easier. The reason is that extending the game time doesn't add more zombies. The waves are all the same size regardless of the time limit, and there's still only 10 waves. So you get to choose whether you have 10 days to prepare for the first wave or up to 20 days. With that extra time, you get more ticks of income, more time to micromanage your troops, more time to explore and clear the map, and more time to develop new research. When you first launch the game, the recommended settings are actually quite challenging. I think if 100 days is normal rather than accelerated or challenging, when really among the options it's the second hardest out of the 4. Beating faster game times is mostly a matter of habit, not spending too much time distracted by microing troops, making sure you stop back by your city now and then to plant more tents or to upgrade the housing that you have, work your way up the tech tree, taking new territory, and building large army and strong defenses for each wave. Those are the 5 core activities in the game, and playing at a fast pace, whether that's 100 days or 80 days, means not fixating on one for too long. Once you've got good habits for cycling between all 5 tasks, not fixating, and unlike me as you see in these videos, don't take the mistake of taking too long to decide the perfect place for a warehouse or farm or whatever, unless of course you just want to pause the game and spend time thinking about it. That's perfectly legit. I don't think it makes interesting videos though, and that's the main reason I'm avoiding it. That first map, called the Dark Moorland, is considered the easiest, and it has a lot of choke points where you can build defenses. There's a fair amount of grass for farms, lots of water to set up fishermen's huts, and a good bit of forest at which to place sawmills. Everything you need for a thriving city is here, except for open space. Being able to build a densely packed city surrounding a market and a bank is very difficult, and is really only mitigated by the fact that you've got choke points everywhere and might be able to get away with lesser defenses because of that. Because of the sprinkling of forests, mountains, and water all over the map, you're likely to have several dead ends or otherwise empty areas that infected waves won't ever path into, and you can use that to build in those areas without having to defend them as heavily. Are you interested in seeing a strategy video just for map 1? Leave a comment below and click the like button. I'll see your input and use it to decide what videos I make in the future. The second map, the peaceful Lowlands, is way more open and not nearly as dark. It's much easier to see what's what without zooming in and out and playing with the F4 key. There's tons of grassland, making this an easy place to grow tons of food. The open land also makes it an easy map to build a huge city, as you're very likely to find an open area right near your command center that's big enough to surround a bank and a market fully with dense housing. The downside, and it is a pretty big downside, is that there are a lot of villages of doom on this map, sometimes right next to your starting location, and that's the big difficulty of this map, especially before you've beaten it. Playing this map forces you to learn how to deal with VODs, that is, villages of doom. You'll learn that poking a building will cause infected to spill out, and that once a ranger attacks a village building at a distance, she won't stop until either she dies or the building goes down. And this can cause one errant ranger to start a cascade that wipes out your settlement. On the plus side, Once you do take out a VOD, you'll get a bunch of gold and material from it. The third map, the Frozen Highlands, is a bit different still. There's a serious lack of grass, but forests are about, and you'll find plenty of lakes. But the biggest problem is that your units move much more slowly, and the best advantage is the converse. The enemy moves more slowly too. It's the kind of situation that makes static defenses like ballista and traps far more valuable. It used to be that power plants were less effective on this map, but with recent patches that's no longer the case. Whereas the first map had tons of little patches of everything, all resources, the second map has big open areas. The third map is dominated by giant lakes, and when adjacent to forests or mountains, this can produce a block that forces the final wave down into just a few choke points. You might find the earlier waves easier to deal with on this map, but the final wave can be brutal. You'll get a choke point assaulted by easily 4 times as many infected as you've ever seen in one place. The final map is called Desolate Wasteland. This map often has tons of crap throughout. Tiny little stands of forests, small lakes, single 2x2 mountains in the middle of plains, stuff like that. Furthermore, resources like stone and iron tend to be scarcer and more spread out. You're going to have a very difficult time finding food, and clearing the whole map will be essential for getting the resources you need to research deep into the tech tree. Maybe only half of the map will have obvious choke points. The other half will have a ton of little gaps that zombies will hit. You might be tempted to use 2 lines of defense a lot on the map here to defend against the final wave, assuming that you gather the food and materials you need to make it that far. Know that there's not more zombies, nor more difficult VODs, nor more special infected on the latter maps. The difficulty is primarily in the layout of the maps. For example, VODs in map 2 make it much harder, the scarcity of grass on the third map makes farms less effective, and the tiny patches of wood, stone, and iron on the final map means you'll have to hunt more for resources. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, please click that like button and subscribe so that I know what y'all are looking for. If you've got questions about difficulty settings, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks. I'll leave you watching Wave 7 here, just after day 52 in an 80-day game. I've got plenty of troops, and 2 executors tear through the tightly packed infected. The wire traps definitely help too.